In this video, we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we're going to talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction because the most important updates of the previous 24 hours are coming exactly from this area, more precisely from this small territory around the city by the name of Pokrovska. So, this is very important direction. As you know, the Russians, more precisely the group of forces is, started their Zaporizhzhia offensive operation almost a month ago. Somewhere at the beginning of August, the Russians launched their offensive, and since the beginning of August, the Russians managed to take under control probably tens of villages to the west of the river of Mokra Yaly, to the west of the city of Velika Novoselka. Obviously, the biggest dynamic we can see exactly in this area. And the most important thing is that the Ukrainians, since the beginning of this Russian offensive operation, haven't paid enough of attention to this area. They were completely focused on the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, where the Russians also, in the beginning of August, managed to break through Ukrainian defense and to get the second defense layer. And the Ukrainians were focused just in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation and to restore control over the second defense layer and to force the Russians to fall back. The Ukrainians basically didn't have enough of forces to do anything with this area. But for some reason, today the Ukrainians changed their mind because most likely the Ukrainians, just by the morning of the 16th of September of 2025, realized that the Zaporozhye direction is the main Russian offensive operation and not the Pokrovsk offensive operation. This is the main Russian strike, the main Russian attack of the autumn military campaign. So once again, let's return to this area. As you can see, we have a lots of icons, blue icons with yellow circle inside. And these icons, every single icon has just one meaning. The Ukrainians decided to evacuate all these settlements. We need to understand one important thing, that Ukrainians are evacuating these settlements not, let's say, for security purposes for the local population. No, the Ukrainians evacuating these settlements with the purpose to bring forces in this direction, with the purpose to stabilize the situation and to most likely organize a counter-offensive operation with the purpose to restore control over the territories the Ukrainians lost during the Zaporozhye offensive operation from the Russian side. So these territories would be taken by Ukrainian soldiers. I'm not sure for now what kind of forces the Ukrainians are planning to redeploy in this area, but obviously they need several thousands, several tens of thousands of soldiers with the purpose to do this. Now let's make very interesting calculations, because now we see what kind of tool the Ukrainians are trying to use. The thing is that Ukrainians have significant problems with manpower. Basically, they don't have enough of forces. So the Ukrainians, due to this situation, decided to use the forces along the line of combat contact as the forces of first fight. Their main purpose just to meet the enemy and to fight with them. And Ukrainians most likely have several, let's say, rescue groups. Rescue group is a group of forces which main purpose is to be redeployed from one front line to another with the purpose to stabilize the situation. As soon as the situation being stabilized by this rescue group, then this rescue group would be redeployed to another position. And if we talk when talking about the Pokrovsk breakthrough, which started at the beginning of August of 2025, the Ukrainians announced their first evacuation somewhere around 15th and 12th of August. For example, settlements and villages around the city of Drushkovka were evacuated. The evacuation of them were announced at 15th of August of 2025. For example, this part of the front line of the Pokrovsk front line was evacuated, or the evacuation was announced somewhere around 12th of August of 2025. Furthermore, at the same period of time, the first corps of National Guard of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that they were redeployed in the direction of Pokrovsk also by the 12th of August. So, to stabilize the front near Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians sent forces from the first corps of the National Guard with the purpose to stabilize the situation and to restore control over these territories. Another important map, I believe that's this one, not this one. Here we can see the maximum progress that the Russians managed to achieve by the 12th of August of 2025. This map, for example, was provided by pro-Ukraine resources. This also map dated by the 12th of August when the Ukrainians just brought additional reinforcement, but not just reinforcement, that was something like a rescue team. And this is the map that was provided by pro-Russian resources. According to pro-Russians, by the 12th of August, the Russians managed to take under complete control all these territories. Obviously, the progress was very huge, right? And everything, like all these episodes, all these things, events, took place somewhere finished by the 12th of August. And then this rescue team began counter-offensive operation, and already by the end of August, the Ukrainians managed to restore control around over 50% of everything that was taken by the Russians by the 12th of August. And furthermore, another important statement was made by the Azov group. This article dated by the 16th of August of 2025, and the Azov, let's say, forces, the first corps of National Guard, stated that over the past 3 days, the forces and means of the first corps of the Azov National Guard, together with adjacent and subordinate units, have stopped the Russians' advance in the defense zone in the Pokrovsk direction. So basically, it took just 4 days for Ukrainians to stabilize the situation. It took just 4 days for this rescue group to stabilize the situation. 4 days. On the 12th of August, they announced the evacuation and they announced about the deploying of this first corps. And by the end of the 16th of August, they stated that the situation was stabilized. And by the end of the 28th of August, almost everything was recaptured by the Ukrainians. So now this is the tool and this is the tactics that Ukrainians are using there now. So most likely the same situation the Ukrainians are planning to do with the Zaporizhzhia direction, but there are several differences that we need to understand. First of all, the Ukrainians still haven't managed to stabilize the situation in Pokrovsk. Most likely the Ukrainians thought that by the beginning of the Zaporozhye counteroffensive operation, they would be able to restore control over the area of breakthrough and then to redeploy this rescue group in the southern direction towards the city of Zaporozhye and towards this Russian Zaporozhye offensive operation zone. But we see that Ukrainians still haven't managed to fix and all these issues, and they were forced to bring forces here without finishing the battle around the city of Pokrovsk, because basically the Ukrainians didn't have any other option. They were forced to bring forces here with the purpose to stabilize the situation. And most likely, this is the main reason why the Russians during the previous night were bombing and attacking the city of Zaporozhye. During the previous 24 hours, lots of explosions during the previous night and during this morning, lots of explosions were recorded on the city of Zaporozhye because the Russians were trying to destroy as many as possible reinforcements and reserves that the Ukrainians were trying to redeploy from the western part of Ukraine towards the eastern part of Ukraine. Most likely, at the beginning of this plan, the Ukrainians were planning to use the first corps, probably, or this rescue team that is currently fighting in the Pokrovsk direction. But due to the fact that by the 16th of September, this group of forces, this rescue team, still hasn't managed to secure the situation, they were forced to take reserves from other directions. And we believe that due to significant number of strikes in the area of Zaporozhye, that Ukrainians were trying to use Kherson forces for these purposes. So they're trying to send Kherson units in the direction of Zaporozhye with the purpose to create, to make something like at least partial stabilization. And of course, when talking, if we make if you use the same pattern, it means that Ukrainians during the next 4 or 5 days will try first to stabilize the situation and to stop the group of forces east, to stop this Russian breakthrough, not to allow the Russians to take under control the settlements of Poltavka, Uspenovka, Gulyai-Polye, Pokrovska, Velika Mikhailovka, and that's it. But this is probably exactly what the Russians wanted, because now the Ukrainians were forced to use forces from Kherson or probably from some other direction to stabilize the situation. And now we understand that the Russians have opportunities and chances, let's say, to cross the river of Dnipro and to begin offensive operation in the direction of the city of Kherson. Do the Russians have this possibility? Yes, now they have these possibilities. And most likely, if Russians begin this offensive operation, the Ukrainians at this very moment will not be able to do anything because From this very moment, they will not be able to get forces from anywhere. They don't have them. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, very interesting video was recorded in the western Zaporizhzhia direction. The Russians published this video where we can see how Russians were bombing and destroying the bridge that goes from the southern part, from the city of Stepnogorsk in the northern direction to the city of Zaporozhye. So, as we know, currently there are very heavy clashes for the city of Stepnogorsk. The Russians managed to dig in deeper in the southwestern part, in the western part, in the eastern part of the city, and in the western part as well. And the only road that Ukrainians used for supplying support is this one. We're using these roads to stabilize the situation, to get fresh forces, munition. But now we see that the Russians most likely damaged or even destroyed this bridge, which most likely can lead to complete collapse of Ukrainian logistic. And this is going to be probably the beginning of a complete collapse of the city of Stepnogorsk itself. Without proper logistics, Ukrainians will not be able to hold their positions for a very long period of time. And most likely, in coming days, we're going to see additional changes on the ground in the area of the city of Stepnogorsk, and most likely the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. And if Russians are able to move further, but they won't do this as we discussed, they will just move most likely in the eastern direction through this dense network of the fortifications. Anyway, we see that not just the eastern Zaporozhye direction is collapsing right now, it seems that the western Zaporozhye direction is going to start collapsing also very soon. Furthermore, let's finish with this direction. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. According to pro-Ukraine resources, the armed forces of the Russian Federation answered the settlement by the name of Nova Ivanovka, so the village was taken and the Russians continued their offensive. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians improved their positions on the territory of the village of Berezova. Maybe today, the group of forces East will publish another video where we will see additional progress on the ground. And according to information we have, the group of forces East established complete control or restored control over the settlement of Andreevka-Klivtsova, which was recaptured by Ukrainians during the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation. Now let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours, we have small changes. Neutral mappers reported that Ukrainians managed to secure the village of Pankovka. This adjustment on the map was made based on the report of the 1st Corps of National Guard of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. They stated that as a result of counter-offensive operation, the village of Pankovka was retaken by Ukrainians. So based on this report and based on the map update of the deep state, we have adjusted the territory as a gray zone or contested area. Furthermore, the Russians are saying, and pro-Western resources are saying, that the Russians during the previous 24 hours introduced additional forces in the area of Novotoretsk. The Western centers are saying that we are talking about the units of the Ukraine, due to the Ukraine reinforcements arriving from Sumy and counterattacks by assault units. Russia redeployed elements of the 8th Army to prevent the semi-encirclement of 51st Army units. So the 51st Army units are fighting in this pocket, and Russians introduced the 8th Army with the purpose not to lose control over this territory. So the Russians introduced fresh forces for this stabilization. So as we discussed in the previous videos, currently both the Russians and the Ukrainians suffer huge losses. Ukrainians have huge problems in this area, and now they're taking forces from I don't know where with the purpose to stabilize the situation in Zaporozhye, but it seems that it will not help them. They will win some time, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, but they will not be able to stop the entire progress on the ground. To stop the entire progress on the ground, the Ukrainians need first to defeat the Russians to the northeast of the city of Pokrovsk, but this is not happening right now. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Serebryanka direction, Liman-Sivas direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions significantly, and according to many sources, according to pro-Ukrainian resources, according to pro-Russian and neutral mappers, the armed forces of the Russian Federation established complete control over the forest by the name of Serebryanka. So this forest was taken by the Russians without any doubts. Of course, we have some doubts because we don't have proofs. But so now almost every single source is saying about this, especially the pro-Ukraine resources are saying this. So the forest was taken, and furthermore, pro-Ukraine resources from Deep State published today an article where we can see this picture This is how the Russian armed forces are roaming around in the village of Yampol wearing civilian clothes to disguise themselves. So, according to information we have, according to pro Ukraine resources, first soldiers of the armed forces of the Russian Federation were recorded on this street. So, this is already a central part of the settlement of Yampol. So, which means that the situation in this area is much worse in comparison with the situation that we saw yesterday and the day before yesterday. And you know that this is not 2022, this is already 2025. And when Russians established control over Yampol in 2022, they didn't know how to use this settlement, how to use all those benefits because the Russians didn't have drones. They didn't have drones for any purposes. And now we can see completely different Russian army in comparison to 2022. If Russians take the village of Yampol under complete control, with drones, they will be able to cut and to ruin Ukrainian logistics completely. And the city of Siversk would be caught in cauldron without any chances for evacuation. Now let's move further. According to several pro-Russian resources, the settlement by the name of Shandrigolova was also taken by Russians by the morning of the 16th of September of 2025 for around 50%. So the Ukrainians control just the central and the western part, and most likely in coming days or even hours, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. But I would like to remind you that according to several pro-Russian resources, the settlement of Shandrigolova was encircled by the Russians, and currently Russians control also the forest to the west of the village. So Ukrainians have no chances for evacuation, which means that the Russians will be a bit slower, but Ukrainians will suffer much more losses. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes on my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.